And we have asked that anything that's federally backed, student loans, mortgages, which are the vast percentage of mortgages, and small business loans, that there be a 6-month forbearance. They don't have to be collected. Finally, we believe we have to mobilize the National Guard to help. Who will feed and watch the kids of a medical worker who has to go to work? Who will make sure that food is delivered to an elderly person who can't go out? Who will make sure that kids get food who are not going to school and getting their school lunches? So we need to employ people to do that right away, but we also need to employ the National Guard. So our legislation, the $750 billion, which may not be enough, deals with the immediate needs, the people who are hurting for health reasons, the people who are hurting for economic reasons, that they've been laid off, they're not getting paid, they can't work because their kids are at home and they can't work. This is job number one: targeted, bold, quick, strong aid. And that is the most important thing we can do. And I think that is the contrast between us and our Republican friends. They're worried about the big businesses. They want to pump some money into the economy. But if you don't solve the immediate health care and economic needs of the people who are hurt, the problem will just get worse. And the airlines will be in worse shape, and the economy will be in worse shape. So we must do all of those things and do them quickly. Today I distributed a PowerPoint, which you all have, and a white paper, which is much more detailed than what I said. Oh, by the way, on hospitals, if we don't get help to our hospitals right away, the large hospitals may survive, although not as well. But medium-sized hospitals, small hospitals, rural hospitals will go under, they tell us, in a month or two. They need help right away as well. Can't have hospitals permanently closed. So the needs are immediate and strong, and our package addresses them. I haven't heard anything coming out of Secretary Mnuchin or the President to deal with these immediate issues. That's job number one. There are other jobs, and we will certainly look at them. In terms of pumping money into the economy, you can't do it without doing the things I mentioned. The things I mentioned come first. And it can't be a replacement for doing the things we're doing, or it'll be a Sisyphean task. It won't solve anything. And it should be very robust. Very robust. And be able to be repeated time after time if it doesn't work at the beginning. But we'll see what happens there. We're focusing on job one. And one other thing I'd say, in terms of help for corporations, and I know that the President is talking to the airlines industry, he's talking to the travel industry, he's talking to the leisure industry, and we just want to make sure whatever hope we give them, whatever help we give them, workers come first. The vast majority of the aid should go to the workers, not to increasing salaries, not to doing the kinds of things that these companies have done, like buybacks. We would prohibit buybacks. We're also thinking that there should be, if they're going to get help, maybe their employees should get on the boards of these companies. Last time, the government took stock when they gave money to the banks. Well, maybe that stock should go to the employees so they have some representation in these industries. We also want to, so we want to make sure, we want them to pay $15 minimum wage, and we want to make sure that they strict requirements, they keep workers in their jobs and not cut their benefits. The aid has to be workers first if we're going to help these industries, not what happened in 2008, where the big boys got helped and the workers and everybody else was left by the wayside. So our plan puts working people, average middle-class families first, It puts the health of the country first, and then we will move on to other things. Senator Durbin. Yeah, okay, one other thing, yes, left out. This should be a four corners negotiation with the White House. The plan that Leader McConnell laid out will only delay things. For the Republicans to first stick together and put together their plan, then work it out with the White House, and then come to us, and then after that go to the House, will just slow things down. I believe the best way to get this going is in a bipartisan way from the outset. We have our ideas, they have their ideas, but Leader McConnell, Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, myself, and the White House sit down and come to an agreement rather quickly. The plan Leader McConnell laid out will slow things down in a significant and dramatic way, and it doesn't start out in a bipartisan way, and above all, this should be bipartisan. Senator Durbin.
This is not just another political issue. We know it. It's a matter of life and death. And today in Illinois, we announced the first coronavirus fatality, a person who passed away while being hospitalized. I also learned from the Illinois Department of Public Health that there was some worry about a nursing home when a person came down with the coronavirus infection, and then they turned around and tested every resident of the nursing home and every staff member. And in the words of the Director of Public Health, dozens of positive tests resulted in that one facility. She told me this. She said, just to let you know, we're going to use up so much of our protective equipment in a place where we didn't even anticipate a challenge. And we are woefully behind in terms of receiving help from the federal government. So I might say at the outset, let us not assume that the first thing we did here, the coronavirus one package that we passed, some $8 billion directed toward medical research, medical equipment, and medical vaccines and such, has done its job yet. We haven't seen it in Illinois. It's been promised over and over again. We have fewer than 500 tests a day in a state of almost 13 million people. The number of people who've been tested for positives really is just a fraction, I'm afraid, of what is truly the case out there. So before we start thinking about phase 2, phase 3, as important as each one of them is, let's get phase 1 right. Let's make sure that the testing kits and the protective equipment is there for Illinois and for every state that needs them. That is absolutely essential to deal with the medical side of this crisis. And let me say as well, it is time for us to pass the second package that passed the House of Representatives in the early morning hours of Saturday. It could have been done, and Leader McConnell knows it, with unanimous consent on Saturday, on Sunday, yesterday, and even this morning. But he didn't move forward with it. Now there are no excuses. He's promised that he'll bring it up, and I hope he does it quickly, because we need to tell the American people we are moving on that bipartisan agreement quickly. There are parts of it which I'm not excited about. There are parts I'm sure the Republicans are not, but it is a bipartisan agreement. And as Leader Schumer said, that should be the beginning point for all of our negotiations on this critical issue. In terms of the CDC guidelines, we hear over and over from Speaker McConnell, or from Leader McConnell, that we should follow these guidelines. Those guidelines call for working from home, which we're certainly not doing. Those guidelines say don't go into a meeting with more than 10 people. I'm not going to count how many are in this room. There were 18 people on the floor of the Senate this morning when we did the prayer before the Senate, 3 senators and 15 others. So we have to understand that this circumstance is unusual. We are not exactly setting the best example for America in how we're doing it, but we have to do it. We have to do it with a sense of purpose and a sense of urgency. We have to understand that business as usual is unacceptable. I agree completely with Leader Schumer when he says that our priority first is the health issue. If we don't deal with that and deal with it effectively, nothing else that we do is going to be of any merit. Secondly, to look at it through the perspective of families and workers across America who are the first line of defense against this pandemic and have to be willing to step forward if they're not feeling well and step away from work, even if it means losing a paycheck. We've got to come through with medical leave and unemployment compensation to make them whole again. I stand ready to work on a bipartisan basis. let us not make this a 4 or 5 step procedure, as Senator McConnell suggested just a few moments ago. Let's put the principals in a room, put the proposals on the table. Let's get this done and done in an effective and efficient, timely way. Senator Stabenow.
Thank you. Well, we all know this is an incredibly difficult time for all of us, for our families and for the people we represent. And we, as my colleagues have said, are laser focused on helping those that are hurt the most, the individuals, the families, the small businesses, the targeted industries. That's where we're focused. And we also know that we are past time in passing the package that came from the House. Part of that package includes waivers that allow school districts to take school lunch money and be able to make sure that children who usually only eat healthy meals at school have the opportunity to eat. So most of the schools closed yesterday. So did the children eat yesterday? Are they eating today? I mean, this is something of paramount urgency to families and to children when we look at the needs of the food banks, when we look at the WIC program for pregnant moms and children. These things have tremendous urgency. Every hour counts. And that's why we are so frustrated that this bill has not already passed. We all realize the next steps need to include both a major economic package focused on, again, people that are impacted, as well as expanded healthcare funding. And first and foremost, this is a public health crisis. This is a healthcare crisis that we have to address. We need to make sure our hospitals and doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers have everything they need to meet the medical needs of people, as well as the medical needs of themselves in this process. And as we work on the next package, I'm so pleased that our proposal makes sure that we address healthcare above the neck as well as below the neck. And what do I mean by that? Well, in addition to our hospitals and our community health centers that are front line on addressing medical issues, we also know that expanding community behavioral health centers is critical, so we're not leaving the mentally ill and people with addiction behind. Medical experts are stressing that people who misuse opioids are at high risk of the coronavirus because opioids impact their respiratory and pulmonary health issues, and they are particularly affected and vulnerable to the coronavirus. So I'm very proud that our package includes addressing that. This is a critical time for everyone in our country, and we are committed to working with the White House. We're committed to working with Republican colleagues to get it right, not in this elongated process that Leader McConnell is talking about, but getting the leaders at the table all at once to be able to negotiate quickly what needs to be done. And let me stress, this is not the time for broad-based tax cuts that mainly help people who least are affected by the crisis. This is the time to help those who are having the toughest time and will have the toughest time surviving this crisis. While the president continues to focus on people who are on the stock market, we are focused on people who need to be able to get to the supermarket. And we hope our Republican colleagues will join us.
Yeah, just one point. We are clear to let COVID-2, the bill that the House passed, go forward right now. It's the Republican side that hasn't cleared the bill yet. I didn't make that clear. And second, I guess the overall point here is we hope the White House will pay attention to some of the things we've talked about, because if you don't deal with the health care crisis, the stock market, which they seem to be more focused on, is not going to improve. Questions? Yes.
Mr. Leader, it's hard to even pick just one or two questions. There's so many about this time. But one, what do you think in general about the idea of $1,000 per person as a form of stimulus? It's something Republicans are talking about a lot. And I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you proposing, or are you open to perhaps a fourth bill after this next stimulus?
Look, we don't know. I mean, this is one of the most serious crises America has ever faced, and we'd like to do as much as we can in Bill 3, but there probably will be other bills. But and on the first point, the main focus has to be on the things we talked about. First, health care and the workers' families who have been put in real jeopardy by the economic crisis. As for just, putting money in people's pockets, it needs to be robust, it needs to be able to be repeated, and it can't be to the exclusion of the things we talked about. Yes?
Senator Durbin talked about the challenges of sort of social distancing when you're
Yes.
in the United States Senate. Senator McConnell said that he wants to keep the Senate in session until this third tranche is completed. What are your thoughts on how long
Well, look,
the Senate should be here?
we have to get this done. That comes first. But we also have to set an example for the American people. Today, we usually have a Tuesday lunch where 47 senators and some staff cram into a small room. Today, we did it as a teleconference, and it worked out very well. And there were only 2 people in the room where I was on the phone with. Yes?
Maybe, Schumer, are you open to the idea of a $1 trillion scope package like the initial?
I think it may have to be higher than that. Our package is a minimum of $750 billion, and there are other ideas that are needed. Yes?
Administration has quoted $50 billion for the airlines. Is that a general price tag that you could support?
Well, look, I think we've got to see the whole thing. It has to put workers first. As I said no salary increases. I mean for the corporate executives. And the buybacks, in a lot of Democrats' cause, a lot of these airlines bought back their stock, so they have less liquidity and cushion right now. How are we going to deal with that? I don't think the American people want to allow them to buy back their stock and then, without any recompense, get aid. Okay?
What kind of recompense?
Well, we'll have to figure that out.
Mark Warner was floating something like a guarantee of 90% of the workforce would be there.
Well, I think it probably should be much more than just that.
Oh, that was just one.
That was just one of his ideas. And I would say that, again, it's got to be a policy that helps workers first. Not going to do what they did in 2008.
One quick follow-up.
Okay.
You're a previous rules chairman yourself. What do you think of the idea of remote voting for the Senate?
Amy Klobuchar's looking into that for us. She doesn't think there's a constitutional barrier at first impression, but it's something we'll have to look at.
Leader McConnell just firmly shut the door and said
Well,
that's not going to happen.
Okay, look, I think we have to do our job first in whichever way we do it, okay? That's for sure. We cannot, there's such a crisis here that we are needed to be working and getting the job done in whatever the quickest, best, healthiest way is. Okay? Thanks.